Ba ba da ba ba da ba da.
Put it in the books! In the history books!
Waiting is Jones. The Mets are the world champions.
In there, strike three called. He got him with a slider.
LFGM. Let's go.
All right, what up, boys? It's the end of July, the best week to be a first place team. It's trade deadline week, and we're breaking it down. Jake, Dan, what are we drinking today, boys?
I gotta apologize. It's a bit of a cop out, but it's a repeat. I've done it. I don't think it was last episode, but maybe the one before. But I'm back to old trusty Tiger beer from Singapore.
I have not seen that one yet.
Oh yeah, you weren't on for this, dude. If
to
you
me.
find this somewhere, it's awesome.
Singapore beer.
It's awesome. I had it at like a sushi place one time, and it was so good that I took a picture of it. I was like, I gotta find this somewhere, and it's like one of my favorites, honestly.
I was about to ask, like, what inspired you to get that? Because that's not a household name.
No, yeah, it was. I had it at a restaurant. It was like, like certain places that aren't known for beer. It would be like, what do you have? And it's like one thing. They're like, we have this, and that's it. And I was like, all right, I'll try it, and it was actually great. Now it's one of my favorites.
Jake does his wide-eye thing, like, oh my god.
Well, I have to tell you, I was inspired to drink something Boston themed today because of the Red Sox kind of handing it to the Yankees a bit. So I went with you can't see it, love it. Sam Adams.
Got the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, it transparently, like, me and Max are gonna have a lot of the same beer because we share a fridge. Like, it's just kind of the way it's gonna be. So,
Have you guys seen the recent Sam Adams commercials? With like, your cousin from Boston or something?
It says, watch out for cougars.
Oh, Dave, I didn't know your ma was out here. Your cousin from Boston.
You see that? Those are great.
I'll drink to that. Let's go.
All right, so after that, let's head into this day in Mets history. We have a couple of interesting ones. So on this day in 2012, Mets legend Jordany Valdespin in his rookie season set a Mets single season record after hitting his fifth pinch hit home run of the season. He was electric, man. I miss that guy.
yeah, he was just like kind of a fun player to watch. Like, nothing like, he was kind of like a flash in the pan, but like really just like an interesting guy.
Am I misremembering, or did he also get hit in the balls with a pitch one time?
See, you would think I'd remember something like that, but I don't.
I'll have to future Jake find that clip and put it in. Past Jake, I admire your foresight here. It did happen. I couldn't find a video, but I got this picture that tells the whole story. Justin Verlander, 2013, 94-mile-per-hour fastball to Valdespin right at the net.
I could picture it happening.
I feel like it did, and he wasn't wearing a cup, I don't think.
I had such a love-hate with that guy, but yeah, I mean, he was great for a little while, no doubt.
He was fun. He was fun in some bad years.
Yes, they were lacking a lot of like spark plug. Like, it was a team full of Kirk Neuenhuises and Andres Torres and Josh Tolley's, and they had Jordany
really well with our like bench mob now.
Yeah.
I feel like he had some pizzazz and some character to him.
So just a couple years later in 2015 on this day, Michael Conforto, first round pick, obviously, became the 1,000th player in Mets history when he made his debut. And I know Dan, I think, mentioned you guys were actually at that game.
Yeah, me and Max, we heard that Conforto was coming up. Like, we didn't have anything going on that night, so we just made our way out to the ballpark and saw Mike's debut. Really exciting. That was the first time we in a good while, that we had an offensive prospect come up through our system like that was that highly touted. Like, I mean, I remember saying on the way there, like, oh, like, you know, we saw like Harvey and Syndergaard and like all these pitchers, right? But like, we really hadn't had the offensive talent come up through our system like him. So it was an exciting night.
And I think Dan put some good context behind that too, because we obviously knew like what we were getting to. The dude was literally drafted the year before. He was kind of rushed up to the big leagues, but with how bad the offense was that season, just even thinking about having somebody who's being compared to like, all right, this could be our next David Wright. This could be like the next phase of the Mets offensive talent. And you know what? I mean, for the most part, he hasn't really let us down. He's been a really good player. But yeah, it was a lot of, and that was the night they traded for Uribe and Johnson as well. Really cool. So it just kind of was the start of a crazy week that ended up becoming a crazy back half of the season and ultimately a World Series team. So awesome.
You mentioned that was an interesting trade. Couple crafty veterans to help out a pretty young ball club. And it's actually a pretty decent segue because yesterday in team history in the year 2000, the Mets were conjuring up a deal with the Reds that would have sent 36-year-old at the time Barry Larkin to the Mets. But the only thing stopping them was Steve Phillips, the GM at the time, would not agree to give him a 3-year, $27 million extension. And because of that, Larkin vetoed the trade and ended up staying with the Reds. Now, obviously, in hindsight, knowing that we ended up making the World Series that year, it probably would have been nice to have a guy like that on that team, I feel like.
You know, it's funny though, at the same time, I'm like, damn, a general manager who actually understands that getting into a long-term extension with a 36-year-old is not a good idea. Isn't that like maybe it would have been nice to have Steve Phillips around when Brody was GM, but yeah, that is crazy.
Yeah, I was just about to say, like, I wanted to look up his numbers quick, like before, you know, we started throwing shade, because this is kind of before my lifetime. Let's see, he hit.
I pulled them up. So
oh, you got it. Okay.
It does seem like we probably dodged a bullet. Now, to be fair, that year 2000, he finished the year hitting .313 with .389 on base, 867 or 876 OPS. So I mean, a good year for that year. However, the very next year he only played in 45 games.
Yeah, I mean, I think your argument, Jake, and I think probably what a lot of Met fans felt like at the time was, this is a team that can win a World Series. Doesn't matter if we have to extend him, get it done, because he could put us over the top. So I don't know. I wasn't a fan back then. I wasn't, you know, I was
right,
too young.
we were too young.
So it's hard for me to really see what was going on at the time, but that's kind of what my mind would say.
Yeah.
So interesting.
And I feel like it is worth mentioning too. So the main reason that I read Phillips wasn't open to doing an extension were two different players. We had a 17-year-old Jose Reyes coming up the system that he was more fond of, which obviously, you know, he was a few years away, but good call there. And then the second one I found was interesting was there's another big time shortstop, but probably more than 10 years younger, that was about to hit the free agent market at the end of the year. Do either of you guys know who that might have been?
This was 2000.
Yeah. Now I don't really know how this works out, because I thought he was a free agent a couple of years later, but I don't know. Maybe he signed a small extension.
Oh, it was Alex Rodriguez, I bet.
Yep. So he was more hoping to allocate money to that. Now that would have been crazy.
Apparently the A-Rod says the Mets were close to doing it, and he wanted to be there.
It would have been awesome.
At the time, Texas gave him what was a contract that he couldn't turn down. So
I don't blame him.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, obviously we're talking about a few trades of or possible trades in the Mets past. But we actually had one come up yesterday. Was it yesterday? 2 days ago, Max? I don't know.
I move.
You want to get into it, Max?
Rich Hill, veteran left-hander coming from the Tampa Bay Rays, and the Mets are sending back one of the fan favorites from April and May, Tommy Hunter, and I believe second-round pick from 2019 catcher Matt Dyer. So I think a lot of Met fans get skeptical just trading with Tampa Bay, because they're like, what do they know that we don't? But at the same time, I mean, this is I think I was telling Dan this yesterday. I was like, let's not make it out to be something that it isn't. Like, this isn't the Mets getting an ace or somebody that's going to put them over the top. But for sure, I thought it was important to go add somebody to fill out the rotation depth in the back end of the rotation who we can rely on, especially before this 5-game set against Atlanta. So this is a huge series coming up during the week. It's before the trade deadline. So many of the people who are holding the big chips and the assets are going to be doing those deals Thursday and Friday, I would imagine. So it's going to be after the Mets have already played Atlanta. So thought it was really important, even if you had to go a little bit overpriced to go get Rich Hill, just because I think the value that he's going to bring even into that series is big. And I don't know what you guys think. I thought like his versatility as a pitcher was really important. So somebody who has been used out of the bullpen before, because when the Mets are healthy and at full strength, Rich Hill is somebody that can go to the bullpen, do a nice job. He's got all those funky arm angles and arm slots that he can bring out of the bullpen. But most importantly, I just think it's somebody that we can count on. So not Robert Stock, not some random person from Double-A, but a guy who's been around who we can count on for the most part.
Yeah, I feel like it's one of those moves that you look at as a fan and you're like they're not done here. So like obviously this is just like a really good building block, right? Like it gives you what you need right now. As you mentioned, like he gives you a lot of different options, like later in the year when you get a little more healthy, hopefully you can throw him out of the bullpen, gives you a little bit of a different look with his slow, soft tossing pitches versus like most of the guys in our bullpen who throw a lot of heat. So different, for those that are skeptical about the Rays, I think it's more of a situation where, they didn't really have a need for him and they were just trying to get the maximum value, which they do so well. So,
yeah. And I read something a little bit that was indicating that they, after the Nelson Cruz trade, that they were looking to just kind of put a little bit more back into the farm system. They hadn't had Rich Hill for a little while. Frankly, I don't really think they need him that much. He was more valuable to us at the moment. The last thing I want to highlight before Jake gets in is that I just think that, I forgot what I was going to say. No, it indicates that I think that they're going to be aggressive at this trade deadline. So, going out there and getting an arm and paying a little bit more to go get a starter for this week definitely highlights and tells me that they're not done, like Dan said, and that they're going to go add some players that can help them. But yeah, Jake, what was your take on this trade?
Well, just you brought up that it may have been like a domino effect from the Nelson Cruz trade. I had heard that as well. Like they might have been trying to just like offset some money. Obviously, we know that they don't play with a lot of money, so that might have been why we were able to get him for basically nothing. I mean, I just pulled up because before this trade, and maybe this is just on me, but I hadn't heard of Matt Dyer before. And so this is his first year professionally. He had been playing in college, obviously COVID shortened 2020, but in 36 games at A ball, he's hitting 194. And then we also know that Tommy Hunter, I think they just found out like 2 days ago that he might not even come back this season. He might not be able to pitch again this season. So to trade a guy that has struggled so far in the lowest of lows in the minor leagues, and a relief pitcher that we wouldn't even be able to use this year, there's no risk, I mean, like
nothing.
He's older, sure. And the other thing is that's interesting. It seems like, obviously I don't want to incriminate anybody or make any accusations, but it seems like he might have been a spider tack guy just by some of the drops in spin rate and such. But even with that, like we just need a guy that's been there and can go 5 innings. Like that doesn't, we don't need him to do anything crazy. And the other thing that I like about this is I can see him toward the end of the year, once we start getting healthy again, getting some of these starting pitchers back, move to the bullpen and sort of play like a Bartolo Colon role, where it's like he can give us long innings out of the bullpen. And if that's the case, because you see, even though we have him, there's still twice a week, we're still having a TBD as a probable pitcher. So if it does turn out to be the case that happens later in the year, like we can have somebody start the game, throw 2 innings, and then come in, Rich Hill can come in and take us into like the 7th or the 6th inning. Like,
yeah.
I love it. I love it. I could care less if he gives up 4 runs a game. We just needed somebody.
They need warm bodies. That's what they need.
Yeah.
It's just like anyone, because you're right. Like 2 days a week, it feels like 3 days a week sometimes that they're not announcing a starting pitcher, and they don't really have anyone to give them length in the bullpen. And who knows what you're getting out of Carrasco and Syndergaard for the rest of the year.
Right.
Dan, what were you going to add?
Yeah, I think just one more thing. Like I think it's important to look at this trade and sort of allow it to set a precedent about what they're going to do. Like you were kind of talking about, like this is not going to be their last move. But like one of the important notes was that the reason that they didn't give up a lot in terms of prospect capital is because they ate a good amount of the money remaining on his deal, which I think it was only $800K. It was less than $1 million. But still, when you're looking at a team that is reluctant to give up their major prospect capital, it's a good thing. And we love to hear that as fans, because in the past, like in order to get an Edwin Diaz, we had to eat money, and then we had to give up a Jared Kalenic. Or, in the past, like you'd be a little bit more hesitant to go out and buy these big name players because you knew we were going to eat the money. So I think it's really exciting to go into a trade deadline knowing that our owner is willing to eat some money in order to maintain our farm system and the level of success that we've had developing players lately.
Well, I think that like right there, it's like you see like in his opening press conference, he seemed to have an understanding of how good teams are built. And part of that was you maintain your organizational depth. You strike at the right times in terms of like trading, and you don't give up your blue chip prospects. So, or you don't give them up for nothing.
And I feel like,
and you don't give them up at the expense of just eating a little bit of money. And $800K doesn't sound like a whole lot, but to the Wilpons it did. So what were you gonna say?
No, I was gonna say like it's just it's really important. You made me lose my train of thought too. I
have something to add while you try and remember. So the one thing I do want to note, I didn't look at it until now, but so I had mentioned that he is a guy that has been sort of linked to the spider tax stuff. So he has been struggling lately. However, even with the recent struggles, he's got a 3.8 ERA on the year for a 41-year-old through 19 starts. Like even with a bad 5-6 start stretch, like that's amazing. And the other thing I like is we have a couple starters, obviously Syndergaard and Stroman that we're gonna have to make some decisions with at the end of the year. So this isn't a guy that like the fans are going to be clamoring over re-signing at the end of the year. But we might have a little bit of leverage with him if we need to. So it's like he's a guy that we can let walk and nobody's gonna make a fuss about it. Or if we need him, we probably can re-sign him on like a 1-year, short-term deal. So I love it. I love it.
Yeah, I think if you if you're giving up like a big name prospect, like it's gonna be the right move too. I feel like they've made all the right moves so far. Like. And even I was watching George Springer last night, and the thought crossed my mind. I'm like, man, we kind of like avoided a lot of like if the fans were making the decisions, like I don't know how well we would have done this year.
Funny, isn't it? Yeah.
So like and I was talking to my dad. My dad naturally brings up, Fernando Martinez and like all these guys, like all these top 5 major prospects that we had in the past, and we'd never pulled the trigger, and they didn't work out. Like Laston's Millage, all those names, right? But I was like, you could also go the other way, and you could think about teams that made those moves and probably regret it, right? Like I brought up the Chicago White Sox with James Shields, and they gave up Fernando Tatis. Like, do you think they would have rather held on to Tatis at that time? Yeah, hell yeah. So like you could flip it both ways, and like I think ultimately we as fans have to just trust that the organization knows their prospects better than we do, because they do. They do.
That's all it boils down to, because, and you're right. Like, it's like, what if the Mets, for that logic said, let's go trade David Wright and Jose Reyes because they're just prospects after all. Like we would have, a stretch of 5 years or 6 years of Mets baseball that wouldn't exist because we traded those guys. So you're right. You have to be, it all boils down to knowing your prospects and knowing what player you're willing to deal them for. You don't just give them up for nothing. So, I guess on that note, unless anyone has anything to add about Rich Hill, any trade targets we're clamoring over?
So, all right. So I think I mentioned to Max earlier, like when we were on just kind of discussing our pre-podcast stuff, that I feel like the Mets, out of like all the teams that are supposed to be buying this trade deadline, are in a super they're in a much different predicament than everybody else. It's a little bit tougher to figure out because we know that we have talent. It's just they're not on the field. So there's a situation that could come where we add a few big name guys, but then the field becomes a little too crowded shortly after with guys coming back. So my thinking is they probably don't really want to add guys that have lots of years left on their contract. I feel like they'd be more interested in short-term guys. Now, it seemed like the big ad was going to be a fielder at one point, but then just pitchers began to go down and more pitchers went down and down. So now what I think that they really would fit them the best would be a 2-player package. They add a bat, doesn't have to be, a star, just add a bat, but a pitcher's got to come along with it. And maybe one of those guys has money attached to them, but like we were saying before, eat some money to get another player that can help him out. Now, there's one guy that I've just been in love with ever since he came up, and he's on an expiring deal. The only problem is this team doesn't really have any pitchers that could be packaged along with him. And with the recent Francisco Lindor injury, not knowing how long it'll take for him to recover, he could play second base, he could play first base. So, we can move Guillorme or VR to short, and one of them doesn't really have to play every single day. I love John Scope. Good hitter, close to 300, but he's still gonna, he can give you 25 to. Well, actually, I think he's already close to like 20 home runs on the season, so like on pace for like nearly 40 home runs. But the only problem is that they don't have a starter that we could package along with him, and I really think that's the route that they're gonna go. So as much as I love John Scope, I don't think they're gonna go that way. I would love to see him in the orange and blue. He could play second. Guillorme and VR can alternate at short. And an expiring contract. So that's the guy that would be on my wish list.
I like that, man. Yeah, I've always thought like Scope was an interesting player. I feel like he's kind of had the misfortune of playing for some bad teams of late. But I mean, early on in his career, he was like a very my buddy's like an Orioles fan. He loved him. Like he loved the way he played the game. And now he's kind of a vet, so he could kind of bring that veteran presence into the locker room. I was kind of perusing through MLB.com just to see kind of like what some of the writers had been saying, like who's going to be available across baseball, what the asking price will be. And one, in terms of like a value standpoint, that has kind of landed with me. Jake was bringing up the 2-for-1 type trade, like killing 2 birds with 1 stone. The Rockies, I saw a trade involving John Gray and Michael Givens, and I think both of those pieces would really fit with our team. Both guys have ERAs under 4. John Gray, I feel like he's the type of guy where he's having a nice season, right? Like ERA under 4, like pitching pretty well. If you change the scenario with him a bit and you put him in a winning situation, take him out of Coors Field, like who the heck knows, man? Maybe he's got like a little Kevin Gausman in him where he breaks out a little bit towards the end of the year, and nice. you have the potential of re-signing him in the offseason with a couple of our pitchers sort of hitting the free agent market. Michael Givens as well, like really solid reliever, has pitched in some big games before. I really liked him in Baltimore, and he's kind of found his way in Colorado, which is not an easy place to pitch. So I was like, hey, like, you know what? And right now they only have the Rockies getting Mark Vientos, who obviously is playing pretty good baseball. Like, good timing for us, right? You're like, hey, like Vientos is kind of hitting the cover off the ball right now. Like, and he's, good player. Seems like he's going to be a good major league player one day, but seems expendable at this point for the Mets. Pull the trigger on that. I would do that tomorrow.
Gray's interesting. He was a high first round pick a couple of years ago. His price tag would probably be a lot higher. So I like that a lot. Sorry, Max. But
No doubt. That was actually one of the moves you mentioned it to me this morning, and I was like, heck yeah, that's the type of move they need. And what's really nice is I do feel like there are a lot of pitchers out there on the market that kind of fit that profile of what the Mets need right now. So Rich Hill gives you that immediate need, but then kind of filling out your rotation with a guy who could be like a 2 or a 3. I'm inclined to almost like trade for guys when they're starting pitchers who have a little bit more left on their deal other than just walking. I'm not opposed to getting a guy who's in a contract year, but I do like the flexibility it would give the Mets and the leverage it would give the Mets with guys like Stroman and Syndergaard and extending them. So I like that trade a lot. Kyle Gibson was another one that I saw. I did just reading this now. I'm seeing that it says Zach Scott has already stated reluctance to trade for rentals. So that was interesting to me because I felt like a lot of the guys that I've been hearing ties to with the Mets have been rentals. So other than like Barrios, who has another year left on his contract. So yeah, I like the idea of adding a starter. I like the idea of kind of packaging together a reliever, a bat, a pitcher. Any of those two would be really nice. I think the Cubs are kind of a match made in heaven for us. It feels like they have been since like 2015, but going to get Baez or Bryant or someone like that would be really exciting. Zach Davies is another starter. I don't think they're going to be in on the Kimbrel sweepstakes. I think he ends up in Boston or even LA with Kenley Jansen's struggles recently. The one that I haven't heard any ties to, I mentioned it to you guys before the show, was Whit Merrifield. So I just like everything I read about the guy is that, he's Jeff McNeil-ish. And I think a lot of Met fans love like vintage Jeff McNeil. Guy who hits for high average, plays everywhere, a lot of speed, team-friendly contract. The only problem is that I don't know if the Royals are necessarily in a rush to get rid of him unless the Mets are willing to offer something significant. And I haven't seen any trades that are drawn up to give me an idea of what it would cost to get him. I just think that would be a nice player to add. So bottom line, I think they're going to be aggressive. I think they're going to add some players that get us excited. But yeah, Dan, what do you got?
Yeah, no, I mean, this is obviously just MLB.com, so who the heck knows if this is like the actual asking price. But, I mean, they are basically asking for 2 top 10 prospects. So this one has it drawn out as Khalil Lee and Mark Vientos, which I think it's a little weird because didn't Khalil Lee come from Kansas City?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if they would necessarily take a guy back that they were willing to move a couple months ago, right?
For me, if I'm giving up prospects in like the 6 through 11 range of my organization, I feel comfortable doing that for a guy who's a good player who's locked up for another 2 or 3 seasons, I believe, who can help me win this year. I'm comfortable doing that.
I think the incentive for Kansas City is that like you're adding a guy in Mark Vientos whose ETA is and even Khalil Lee is right around the corner, right? So you're resetting the clock, and you could essentially plug in Mark Vientos anywhere, like in the infield, right? First or third or first. Is he's a third or first, right?
Yeah,
pretty much. Yeah.
Right. So I mean,
it's like you're speeding up that rebuilding process. Yeah, to me, it's just like, all right, you maximizing his value right now by trading him right now for something that. But then again, he's 32, and the longer.
In theory, right? Like, if he has years left on his deal, he's as young as he'll ever be. Like.
And I think for Kansas City, I mean, his part of what makes his game valuable is his speed, his stolen base ability. So the older he gets, the more diminished that skill becomes. So maybe it's wise of them to trade that while that's still something that is in his game. I don't know. I mean, but yeah, I think that's something to consider. It's a player I like. It's not someone I'm dead set on. The trade deadline is not going to be a failure if they don't add him, but it's something that intrigued me when I saw it. Jake, what do you have?
So I was reminded of this when Dan mentioned his Rockies package. But I feel like with all the pitching injuries that we've had, starting pitching injuries, and the way that the offense struggled in the first half, obviously they've been great as of late. It seems like all the names that we've been talking about, not us, but as a fan base in general, have been either starters or a bat to help liven up the lineup. But I think something that's very underrated, and like I said, I applaud Dan for adding one in his trade deal, is that we have really just used the hell out of our bullpen, and like it would be silly for us to expect the same thing from them going into the later months of the season and into the playoffs the way that they've been used already. So although maybe it wouldn't be like the biggest need for us at the moment, it would really, really make a lot of sense if we were able to bring in another reliever, maybe even two that, they don't have to be big name guys, but we got to disperse the innings a little bit better, because once we get into September, October, it's only going to get worse. There's only going to be more innings shelled out by our bullpen. And if we have guys that are gassed when it comes down, to the most important games of the season, we're not going to be able to make it. So I just want to put that out there. I'm sure they're thinking the same thing too. But to anybody that isn't, just keep that in mind, because it really could come back to bite us, and as it has before.
It's no doubt. I mean, like, you're looking at, that's not the sexiest move to do, but I mean, I look at teams, and you could look across town as an example, a team that used their bullpen a lot during the year. It was dominant. It held up. And then in the postseason in October, it wasn't as good. Like the Yankees, the last couple of years, they have guys who just don't look like the same pitchers in October as they do in, the middle of the season. So yeah, the Mets got a lot to add. It's going to be interesting. So yeah, Dan, what were you going to say? You have anything?
Yeah, I think the good thing is that like the Mets don't necessarily, like, I think they will make a splash, but like a lot of these moves don't necessarily involve giving up like a lot, right? Like adding a bullpen arm or two. Like if you're adding just like professional relievers, right? Not like, we're not talking Craig Kimbrell or one of the major relievers out there. If you add an arm who's like, he's competent, he can do the job, like that's not going to cost a lot. And like we just added Rich Hill, like added to our starting rotation. We didn't give up anything really, right? So like even if we do like 2 or 3 of those minor moves, and I think we all expect a major move to come. We don't really know what it's going to be. But yeah, I think that you're adding to a team that's already got first place pedigree. I think the thing that we forget is that we're adding like Carrasco. We're hopefully adding Syndergaard. Like these are guys that like are almost like artificial trade deadline moves. Like they weren't on our roster. They haven't been on our roster, and we've gotten by without them. So it's going to be fun, like to see what they decide to roll with. And I'd imagine that they're going to go value all the way. They really don't want to trade their farm system away. So I think like those like Joey Gallo type moves like probably won't happen. You never know though. I think that's what's exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's plenty of opportunity to go kind of bargain hunting on a lot of different ends, especially if you are a team that's willing to kind of absorb some money, which I think the Mets have indicated they will be. What's going to be really fun to watch is, I think, a lot of like based on what the moves they make. So let's say they add another starter or maybe 2 relievers or something, kind of seeing maybe what they think Syndergaard could be. Because I think if you add several starters, does that indicate that you're not super confident he's going to come back and give you length? Is he more of a relief pitcher? Is he more of an opener when he returns in September? If you think he's going to return at all. Jake also brought up the bullpen, just adding to that. Do they go and add kind of like a marquee reliever? And does that show like their trust in Edwin Diaz? Like, do they trust Edwin Diaz enough to get this done the rest of the season to, not have to add somebody with closing experience? It's going to be interesting, I think, but it's going to show you a lot of where they kind of see this team. Do they trust certain players? Do they kind of see certain guys returning? Yeah, I think that's going to be interesting just to kind of look at as well.
If we do see Noah at some point this year, I've mentioned this to you guys for years that this is the way that I think he's best utilized, although he, just money-wise, he would never want to. But man, would he be an electric reliever, dude. And especially like if there's any time for him to do that, it's now, because he hasn't pitched in so long. They can't have him go out there and throw 80, 90 pitches. Like, go ahead, give us 2 innings out of the bullpen, throw it as hard as you can, and ice your arm for 4 days. Like, go ahead, dude.
Yeah,
But
look, man, I like him. I think it would really show me a lot about his teammate mentality if he came back and just said, like, look, I'm signing a 1-year deal. I want to be a starter next season, but for this season, put me in the role that's going to help this club the most and help us get to a World Series. To me, him not demanding to be a starter would show me a lot about his character and what he can do. Because if you throw him in the back end of the bullpen and tell him to throw every couple days, I think he would be nasty. And I think it would help this team tremendously because they don't need him at the back of the rotation, I don't think. Especially he's going to be a shell of himself.
And because he's expiring, like I feel like he's for sure is like as whenever possible, he's going to want to come back. And he probably, if, you know, at that point, trade deadline will be long past. I'm sure we will have a different looking rotation by then. So, you know, they might just not have room for him in there. And at that point, it's like, well, do you want to pitch a couple relief innings or not pitch at all? And then go hit the open market with having not pitched at all for over a year, you know? So, I mean, but it could end up working out so well for us. I got to say, I would feel a lot more comfortable if this team made 4 or 5 not so fancy but reliable moves, whether it's adding to the bullpen or the back end of the rotation, than for them to just do one splash move and have given up so much that they can't do anything else. You know, give me another back end starter, give me a reliever, and give me a guy that we can plug somewhere into the lineup. And then obviously we have our own internal reinforcements that can follow.
Yeah. So the question I have, I was just like reading all the major headlines, when you look up MLB trade deadline, and like one of the things I'm noticing is how, as a fan, you throw out all these trade ideas and they all sound great. What you're willing to give up, what you're not. And then you realize like, other teams are thinking the same thing. So like the question I have for you guys, like how much does it scare you when you see like here's a headline, like the Brewers are heavily targeting bullpen, and this is a bullpen already that has Devin Williams and Josh Hader. I see the Dodgers, Andrew Friedman hinting at a very aggressive trade deadline. And like with the Dodgers, you can never even predict like where they're going to add because they already seem stacked. And then they add Mookie Betts, they add Manny Machado, right? Like you don't really know, like they got Chris Bryant. Like, so the question I have is like how much do you let those teams influence you? Even like division rivals, like you have the Phillies and the Braves, like if they're bidding on somebody, like do you make sure that they don't get that guy?
I'd like to answer that. I was laying down for bed last night and I was like just scrolling through my phone and I got a Bleacher Report notification saying the Phillies are looking to be aggressive buyers.
I saw that too.
And that in the moment scared the crap out of me a little bit because I was like that sort of created sort of like an urgency for me as a Met fan. I was like, shit, if they add somebody like, do we need to add somebody big? But then I really try to circle back to like the idea that like you can't let you should, like, if you can improve your team significantly without giving up too much, you should do that. And you don't let external factors, influence that. So if the Mets can get like significantly better and they think they're doing something smart, do it. You know what I mean? Like it shouldn't be like, you shouldn't improve your team or not improve your team because of what somebody else is doing. And I think that's what the Wilpons did too often. They were like in 2016, I think back, and they didn't have like a super aggressive offseason. And I think if they did, they would have put themselves over the top. But what they were doing was they sat back and said, we're a lot better than everyone else in our division right now at the moment, and we don't need to do anything. So they got complacent and they didn't do anything. So the Mets right now are sitting 4 games up, and they could be complacent if they want to be. But where I'm at is like, even if the Phillies don't do anything, even if the Braves don't do anything, like improve your team if there's an opportunity to do that. Anyway, Jay, did you have any thoughts on that?
I just wanted to say what Dan mentioned with the Dodgers, where it's like they're already so deep, and then you see these reports that they're looking for X, Y, and Z. I thought it was funny. I saw some report the other day. I can't remember the actual like adjectives they used, but they basically said like the Dodgers are like scrambling for another starting pitcher. And I was like, oh, I guess maybe because Bauer or something. And I was like, that's interesting. Let me look at their rotation. And I'm looking at their rotation. They still have like six guys that any one of them we could plug into ours and would immediately be like the number 3. And I'm like, that's crazy. But like, that's what we're competing with. But like you said, Max, it's like, we can't pay too much attention to what these other teams are doing, because if we start trying to get into an arms race, it only hurts us.
The Mets are still not at a point where they can get an arms race and win, because the Dodgers, I think the Mets can make 4 or 5 moves at the trade deadline and they still won't be as good as the Dodgers. The
other thing that doesn't really worry me though is like, so obviously this is our first year with the new regime, and like you see look what they did in the offseason. They went after guys that weren't the biggest names, but they knew who they liked. They signed them, and it's worked out. So I'm not too worried, because I feel like even if certain big name guys that we might be as fans targeting, come off the board and get traded somewhere else, I trust that they can find guys that are lesser known that maybe have performed in the past or have shown potential, and they can squeeze the most out of them. So I'm not too worried. I feel like at this point, at least, we can trust their judgment as to who they want to target.
Yeah, and I see Dan throwing in a couple questions into the chat, which I like. Do you try to build your team in a certain way to defeat other teams within your division? And then, with the way the current playoff format is kind of drawn up, the 3 best teams in the league are in the NL West. Those teams will all play each other in the first round of the playoffs in the division series. The Mets would be matched up with the Milwaukee if the playoffs started today. So, furthermore, do you try to beat the Brewers? Do you try to build your team to beat the Brewers? I think the Mets have a pretty straightforward path here. I think it's more about all right, we know where our holes are. We know where we need to add, it would be nice to add somebody in the middle of the lineup to hit. It would be nice to add some starters, nice to add some guys who can give us length in the bullpen, give us insurance if we don't see the same, Trevor May or Seth Lugo or Edwin Diaz in the second half of the season. I think it's very clear what the Mets need to do at the trade deadline. But like Jake said, you don't get an arms race with the teams that are still, I think you put yourself in a dangerous spot if you're comparing who wins the trade deadline. I think you just do internally what you think is best to do. And that's that. But
I also think what Dan threw out there, getting guys that you're basically getting to specifically get certain teams out, like lots of lefties in the Dodgers lineup. You said maybe add a left-handed reliever or a starter. But in our situation, I think we just focus more on our needs and not the other teams, because as we've seen, obviously least amount of wins for any of the division leaders. But when we've gone up against these teams in the regular season, we're winning series. So I'm confident that we can win the games. I think we just got to fill our holes and not worry as much about the other teams. I would like to add another lefty though. Loop has been amazing. But I just, it's a little bit sketchy to just have the one lefty out of the bullpen for the entire season.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say too, because I love what Aaron Loop has done. The fact that he can go out there and open a game and throw 3 innings, that's great. Yeah, and I think the reason I brought up those questions was because I read an article towards the middle of the year, maybe in like May or June, about how Kyle Bloom basically built the Rays to defeat the Yankees, because he knew that they were the team that was standing in the way of where they wanted to go. So he threw a bunch of money at, not money, but resources at right-handed pitching so that they can get all those right-handed batters out against the Yankees, right? He went to Boston, did the same thing the past 2 years he's been there, and they're sitting in first place, right? So yes, you should first and foremost address your needs specifically and make sure that you're playing the best baseball possible. But I think in the background, you have to also consider heavily what you need to do to get those 27 outs to get you to where you want to go. And I think a lefty arm would be so huge in the National League. First of all, to win your division, but second, you're looking at teams that you have to get through, and you're the Dodgers have so many lefties that you need to get out, and Aaron Loop can only pitch so many of them, right? So I think there's a balance that Zach Scott and Sandy need to strike here, and I think it's going to really dictate where the season goes.
I do have one just zoom out focus question if we're like kind of done with the nitty gritty of the trade deadline thing, but I'll bring it back to like big picture. Are you guys cool with that?
Let me just say one thing. So yep. I see what you're saying, Dan, with the with the Heim-Bloom parallel, but the one thing I'll say is like I think it was more necessary for the Rays and I guess now the Red Sox to do that because it's more of a direct competition like within the division. They got to get the Yankees out in order to make the playoffs, and then once they make the playoffs, anything can happen. But I think our path to the playoffs is a little more clear. And I mean, I know it's still, we've been in first place for quite some time, but it's, it's not like we've pulled away. But that being said, like we've beat up pretty well most of the teams in our division. I'm not too worried about us getting there. So I don't know how much they would put stock into trying to beat teams out of the division just because you see them less often. But at the same time, if it's rental guys that are going to be gone by the end of the season anyway, you kind of could get away with that.
The question I pose is still the same though, right? Like Max mentioned it. Nothing is definitive. There's so much of the season left to play. But like the best teams in the National League are from the West, which essentially means that the East and the Central are probably going to line up in the DS. So like, do you like consider that when you're at the deadline here? You're like, man, like Milwaukee's lineup really struggled against this starting pitcher. Like statistically, like everyone in this lineup struggles against this guy. Like, do we go out and get this guy who seemingly dominates Milwaukee's hitters, right? Like how can you not consider that, right?
Of course, I think you consider that. Yeah, what I actually am curious, Dan, about what you're saying is like, all right, 5 games. Like, first of all, I think first and foremost, you have to beat the teams in your division. So you have to take full advantage and say like, all right, what are the teams that are going to help, or what are the players that are going to help us beat Philadelphia and Atlanta? Because they got to get in. And then a 5-game series against Milwaukee, who's probably their strength is there's 2 starting pitchers. We've got Jacob deGrom in a 5-game series who's going to throw 2 of those 5 games most likely. And then you follow that with like Walker, Stroman, Carrasco, guys who are like all-star level pitchers. Like, what do you do to you kind of answered it. Like you try to add guys who maybe were better against Milwaukee statistically, but is that something that you go out of your way to do? Or is that more of something like, all right, you look at that and say, that would be a nice perk?
To me, I think it's more of a bonus.
I think it's more of a bonus for sure. Like I said, like you're looking for, I think it's one of those things that it's a secondary thing as opposed to the primary. And I hate to like narrow it down to just pitching. Cause like obviously it can go to hitting too, where you look at a guy like Chris Bryant and you're like, wow, like he was in Milwaukee's division for 6 or 7 years, right? Like he must know a lot of the pitcher's tendencies in that division, right? That could help you, right? Like, and that's not the reason you're going to get Chris Bryant. Like, yeah, but it's definitely, like you said, it's a perk. You look at it and you're like, at the end of the year, like Zach Scott looks like a genius for bringing Chris Bryant. Cause you're like, wow, like they really did their business. Like they did their due diligence. So yeah, that's kind of what I mean by that. I'm not really looking to get too into it, but
so I'm kind of curious, like Steve Cohen has set this 3 to 5 year like window of, like we want to win a World Series within this time. So how aggressive are you guys willing to get at this trade deadline, which is kind of where like, this is a team that I've always been a proponent. Like if you have a chance to get to the playoffs and get something done and get into the tournament, you do it, and you do it at all costs. But at the same time, it's interesting. Like if I had said, all right, like if you don't give up Ronnie Mauricio for Berrios or something, let's say Philadelphia needs pitching. He goes to Philadelphia. Philadelphia is willing to give up what it takes to get him. They go at a bat that you don't have. So they get a lot better. And let's say the Mets add somebody, but it's not somebody that is like the sexy name. Can you live with that? And is that like sensitive? Or like, are you okay with that knowing like this front office is committed to 3 to 5 years? Are you okay with a pitcher like that or someone like that going in the division?
It's tough for me because if you look at the contracts that we have right now, the team can look really, really different in a short time. Like we've got a lot of guys in the next couple of years that are coming off the books. So I'm a bit skeptical just because of that, our specific situation. I'm a bit skeptical to give up our our top couple prospects, because who knows like how quickly we might need them, or like if somebody else comes along that we trade them for that's more, under team control. That being said, we're in first place, but like not by that much. So like a guy going somewhere else in the division that's a big name and maybe turns it on in the second half of the season could be hugely like detrimental to our playoff chances. So do we give up a big prospect to block him from going to another team in the division? I don't know. It's tough. I do feel like we have like a decent farm where like, we might be able to give up, and they're mostly in the same positions, like Beatty, Vientos, Mauricio, all for the most part play similar positions. So I guess I'd be okay with giving up one of those guys, but it's got to be for the right guy, I guess.
Yeah, it's a really hard question to answer because like I look at the team across town and like me and Max talk about how they almost just didn't pull the trigger quick enough and their window might be gone. Like they didn't trade the Clint Fraziers. They didn't trade like their high-end prospects to get what they needed to do to win that specific year. And I think they regret it probably, like if you ask them today. But at the same time, like, you don't want to give up too much. You don't want to like put everything into this year because it doesn't have to be this year. The thing that worries me is like what Jake said is you're going to lose a lot of guys to free agency. Not a lot, but this team could look different, right? And you have Jacob deGrom in his prime, Michael Conforto in his prime. Like all these guys are sitting here like the time is almost now, like right, in a way. Lindor's in his prime. Like you're looking at it, you're like, why not this year, right? Like if there's any year that we could do it, like the division's wide open. It's not like Philly, Washington, and Atlanta aren't going to stop trying. Like they're going to be right there with us for the next 5 years too, right? They're going to be building for the next 5 years as well. So like while we're here, let's fucking go get it.
The Mets are clearly the best team in this division, and this is where I go so back and forth on it because I'm like, all right, I've seen the Mets teams that are really good. They don't go pedal to the metal, and then they just phase out very quickly, and they're not as good for a while after that because they didn't like hit the gas. But then I'm like, I feel that way, but then how do I feel if I see Ronnie Mauricio's name in a deal, or I see Francisco Alvarez's name in a deal, or Brett Beatty? Like, how do I feel when I see that name in a deal? And I don't know if the hidden gem is out on the market right now. Like there's a guy that nobody's talking about that's going to get traded. But as it currently stands, like there aren't guys on the market right now that I'm willing to give up an arm and a leg for. Because the really good players are in a contract here.
Yeah, that's the thing is like I'd be so much more open to giving up one of those top guys if we're getting back a guy that we know isn't going to just leave us high and dry in a couple months. Like I'm somebody that has liked Barrios a lot in the past, but I just feel like they're asking for so much for a guy that at this point now it's been a few years that he's been expected to do a lot and he hasn't quite gotten there. But so I don't know. I guess I would be open. He's probably the guy that if we're giving up a prospect, I would want it to be him.
Yeah, I hate using this quote because it was Brody Van Wagenen, but like you almost want to have like an eye to the future, like win now, win in the future, like build sustainably. Like I think if you're splitting hairs, you want to try to find moves that will help you win in 2 years. Like in a weird way, like the Marcus Stroman deal, I thought was really solid because like it gave us a real shot to win in 2019. Like, yeah, that team came up short. But like nobody can deny if we made the playoffs that year, like we were probably going to go pretty far, right? With the pitching we had. So like an eye to the future isn't really a bad thing. Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily know if I have the stones to give up a lot for Barrios, but Jeremy Hefner, like who has done a really good job with our pitchers, like has openly said he would love to have that guy in camp. Like he was the Twins pitching coach, right? So like he knows Barrios very well, like probably did some good work with him. So, like I said, like at the end of the day, we're just fans. Like these guys know a hell of a lot more baseball than we do. We can only speculate as to what like our prospects are. But if they ended up making a move to bring Barrios in here, like I'm gonna have to trust it blindly, right?
Yeah.
They've got a lot of hard decisions to make, but this is why you have like good baseball people in your front office. This is why Steve Cohen brought in Sandy Alderson and Zach Scott because it's like that. These guys know what they're doing. The small sample size I've seen of Zach Scott, it reminds me a lot of Joe Douglas with some of the moves he's made. It's like, all right, they're all smart, they're all good. We haven't seen that major splash yet from him, but I think we're about to see it. All right, boys. Do you have anything else?
I was just gonna say to wrap it up. Let's just do a quick hitter. One or two guys that we hadn't mentioned that you'd be happy with them going after, or you think there's a good chance of them going after. I'm just real quick. I think it would be tough with the amount of guys that they have on the block for us not to go into the Chicago Cubs well. Give me either Zach Davies or Andrew Chafin or both.
I'm thinking the Mets end up landing Chris Bryant. I think it's just going to happen. It was a match made in heaven. They've been talking about it since the offseason. I think it's going to happen. I don't know exactly who they're going to add. I think they're going to add another starter. They're going to add another reliever. So I think Dan's trade with the Michael Givens, John Gray is also a really interesting deal. And I think if between those two deals, so Bryant, Gray, Givens, I think this makes the team a lot better. It makes them a playoff team. I'd love to see that.
I think that they're going to get one of the Cubs, and I think it'll be to the likes of what Jake said, like a little position player plus pitching action. The move that we didn't bring up today was Javi Baez. I think that like Buster only tweeted this, and it made so much sense to me for some reason. But with Lindor out, not knowing how long he's going to be out, you could have Baez play shortstop for a month. Great defensive shortstop, right? And then when Lindor gets back, plug Lindor at short. Baez can play second, and you're really solid up the middle. You don't have to commit long-term to Javi Baez. Like, he's gone after this year. So, like, ride that
you could
until it dies. Right?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Let's freaking go. Let's get all of them. Let's get Baez. Let's get Bryant.
A four-player deal. Give us the reliever, starter.
You can bring Rizzo over if you want.
Yeah.
But,
turn the M upside down and we'll wave the W every day like them.
Wumbo.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So look for us in section 105 tonight. We're hopefully maybe catching a foul ball. We had one come right at us the other day. So hopefully Jake brings his mitt and we get a souvenir.
Right by the Jake's 58 sign, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Look for us there.
Look out for us.
Look for us. So, and hopefully next time we're talking, we have a lot more to discuss, a lot of excitement. But until then, we'll see you soon, guys.
LFGM, baby.
Great to be back.